Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our Brand Trust webinar today. Matt Latham, our Senior Product Manager for Brand Trust, has been prepared some insightful content for us. We're very excited to share more about the future of Brand Trust. Just a quick reminder, share your comments and questions using the chat or question feature on the right, and we'll be sure to address your interest. Matt, are you ready to take it away?
I am, yes. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Brilliant. Okay. Susan, do you want to do your introductions first and then I can kind of jump in and go into the product updates afterwards?
Sure. I'm Susan Verona. Some of you may know me and see me on the Sift Space community. I manage our knowledge program and our community. Matt, who is our senior product manager for RedSift Brand Trust, is bringing a wealth of information from his past experience to RedSift, and you'll see through this presentation all the good things that he's helping drive with our Brand Trust product. So Matt, I think I'll let you go over the agenda and we'll keep on moving.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Susan. And just to add to that, some of you may not have met me yet. I know some of you have. And for those who haven't met me, I haven't been at RedSift for too long, probably about 6 to 7 months now. But previous experience, I spent quite a few years in network security, network analytics, and advanced data visualization for governments, intelligence agencies, and so on. So kind of making the transition into cybersecurity felt like a natural one for me. And we've got a pretty packed agenda actually today. So we're going to cover some of the recent product updates. In fact, let me go to the agenda now. So we've got some of the recent product updates I'm going to go through. I've just picked a couple, and one of those was actually released yesterday. And I'm also going to go through some of the features we've got on our roadmap. I say some because we're working on lots of different things. Some are smaller than others, and some of the projects I'll show you today are some of the bigger things. There are things that we won't cover. For example, we're working on a whole round of performance improvements across the platform, which are going to be released next week. And I won't cover those, obviously, but anyone who's interested in the performance side of things, there's a lot of improvements coming next week. Then once we've gone through the upcoming features, there is going to be time to ask any questions. But throughout this session, if you do have any questions, just post them in the chat. Susan will kind of shout at me to say, Matt, we've got a question. So you can keep it as live and interactive as possible. And then finally, we'll talk about the community. All right, so let's get into the recent features. So the first one, this was released in December. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to rework the risk rating. So it was much more comprehensive. It was easier for you to be able to see what was involved in the risk rating. It was something that we hadn't looked at for quite some time. So we actually looked at every signal we were collecting for each lookalike, and that includes kind of the DNS, whois information, all of our AI image technologies. And then we put that into a scoring system from 0 to 100. If you remember, we've still got the old risk rating in the product at the moment, but that worked on kind of a bar system, 1, 2, or 3. And now we've got 0 to 100. So there is still low, medium, and high risk, but they're actually segmented by bucket. So 0 to 36 is low risk, 37 to 70 is medium, 71 to 100 is high risk. But it allows for more differentiation within each category. So, for example, a 99 high risk is going to have many more signals on it, and we think is going to be potentially more malicious than a 71 risk. This is the first step as well towards moving to an intelligent machine learning model for risk scoring as well. And the great thing about machine learning model is we can put so much data into this model, and then we can start figuring out maliciousness based upon kind of correlating data across essentially hundreds of different metrics. So that is something we're working on. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So that's the risk rating, and this is in beta at the moment, so it's very organic. We're continually updating it, and actually the next feature is an addition to the risk rating. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the recent subdomailer research by Guardio Labs. So essentially, Guardio Labs for many months have been researching quite an extensive attack that mainly and predominantly uses dangling CNAMEs, so CNAME takeovers, and also SPF takeovers. So a CNAME takeover, I'm pretty sure everyone knows what that is, but if, for example, you've had a CNAME on a subdomain and for some reason that's expired, an attacker's registered that, that would be a CNAME takeover, and an SPF takeover could be very, very similar. So an SPF takeover could be that one of the includes in your SPF file has expired in some way, and again, an attacker has gone to register that. The chaining that the Guardio Labs reported is quite extensive, and our other products on DMARC and ASM have also rolled out their own updates as well regarding subdomailers. And essentially, we've created our own threat feed. So when Randall and Rahul first founded this company, they had in the back of their minds this type of attack would occur one day. So a lot of our tooling is actually built to support the kind of intelligence that we've created, and we've got our own intelligence feed of thousands of these subdomainers that we've detected. It's an ongoing, continual process. We expect that list to get much bigger. So one of the things that we're doing is, if we find a lookalike and it matches our intelligence threat feed, where we can actually match it to a known subdomailer, we will alert you to that. And there are different types of subdomailer we may detect. We've got a full blog article on this, and you should see this in the product now if indeed you do have a subdomailer. But there's a learn more button that you're going to be able to go and read the blog article. And on our website as well, we've got an SPF checker where you can enter a domain and you'll be able to see all of the threat intelligence information that we're providing. And that's for free. Okay, so identities is in development at the moment. So this is a coming soon feature. Now with identities, it's an existing feature in the product. However, we tried to release this initially as very much an MVP. So there is some polishing required from a UI UX perspective, but we're also adding additional functionality to make it easier to be able to see things like, okay, you found these identities. Where did they actually come from? What piece of metadata did you get this identity from one of my domains? And then when we actually go through the process of an enabling identity, when that comes through to your activity table, it's going to be much easier to be able to see where this lookalike domain came from, why we think it's an asset. Sometimes when we think it's just a potential asset, but we're not quite sure whether it's malicious as well. So there are two main use cases for identities. Essentially, the first thing is what we're trying to do is surface assets that you might own. So this can fall into the use case of shadow IT. And the second use case is surfacing assets that may be using some parts of your metadata from a DNS level and have registered. I'll give you an example. So let's say someone who's used your org name when registering a domain. We will be able to surface those things as well. So what we do is, if you enable an identity, we will bring those as lookalikes into the activity table, but they'll be tagged with asset or asset question mark for you to be able to review. That workflow is being revised at the moment with new functionality. So as it gets closer to the time, I can definitely share more information about that. And actually, as part of that work, we're also revising the activity table itself. So as it stands today, we've got the activity table that will show just a table of data. We've got all of our filters to be able to kind of slice and dice the data, save those to views, however you want to triage your lookalikes. However, we are adding a summary bar along the top, and this is collapsible. If you don't want to see it, you can just collapse it. But the summary bar will give you a tab by tab summary of things like the risk score. How many high risk have I got versus low risk? How many lookalikes in here are actually tagged as an asset or an asset question mark? Potential assets I own. And then we've got additional widgets that might include things like top DNS providers. Are we seeing a spike in DNS providers from a particular DNS provider, which could indicate kind of a consolidated or coordinated campaign? Image categories. So as many of you know, we do lots of AI recognition on your images that we capture from lookalikes. So if we're finding that there's a big increase in signing forms, we will kind of show this as well. So you can quickly see at a glance what the kind of trends are and what the breakdown of that information is. We expect over time that these widgets are going to be customizable, so that there will be more and more of them available, and you may be able to just click and show which ones you want. Okay, so this is one of the big features we're working on at the moment. So as you know, at the moment, we have the ability to be able to detect the apex domain of a lookalike domain. But what if there is content hidden somewhere within the structure of that domain? So we could have like a /signing or a /about. So we're adding the capability to be able to crawl lookalike domains for malicious content. And then for each URL that we crawl, we'll apply all of our AI image detection. So logos, detected keywords, signing forms, facial recognition, which I'll come to later on. And if we find a child URL and it has malicious content, then that will contribute to the apex domain's risk score. And the good thing about this as well is you will also be able to submit individual URLs for takedown. So this is probably more required for takedowns like Google Safe Browsing, because if you tried to take down an apex domain that didn't have enough malicious indicator on it for Google to say, okay, this is a blatant phishing attempt, they may reject it. However, if it's got a signing form on it and that's buried in another page, submitting that page will actually block. If you're going to do a takedown with a takedown provider, then if you send the request or you download the PDF, then all of that information will be contained within the PDF. So it increases the evidence available. So I've got kind of I've got three examples actually of how this could be used and how it works. So the first one, let's say we've got lookalike.com, which is what we discover now. It's red because we found malicious content. In this case, we found your logo. We've crawled that domain, and now we've got 3 additional URLs, all of which are malicious as well. And going to my earlier point about the Google Safe Browsing, submitting any one of these pages would probably get rejected by Google Safe Browsing. However, because this one has phishing indicators on it, in this case a sign-in form, this would be accepted by Google Safe Browsing and it would get blocked. The next example is, let's say we're trying to find malicious content that's embedded more deeply down a domain. So we could have an apex domain that looks very innocent. So let's say this has gone through our risk score. We've given it a fairly low score of 15. We then crawl these web pages, and now we found one page buried down, and this page is malicious. It's actually got your logo on it. It may have some other content it's hosting. And what we'll do here is we'll increase the risk score for the actual apex domain, lookalike.com, based upon the malicious content we found further down embedded. So you will be able to see this fairly quickly. And just to put this into context, what we're imagining this would look like from a UI perspective is, imagine now that you have an additional column in your activity table that will tell you if we found URLs crawled. And we won't crawl URLs for every domain. There will be some criteria we can set. There's also going to be potentially an option for you to scan manually domains as well, if you're interested. And this might be if you're uploading a manual domain. And then when you go into the details page, we will have a way for you to be able to see clearly how many URLs we've crawled, to be able to navigate through each one of the URLs and then see the image detection that we've kind of performed on each one of them. So you may have your image for your Apex domain, you go to your next URL, then you have the image we've captured for that, again with all of the malicious indicators and the annotations for things like logo, detected keywords, and so on. And as I said, this all contributes to the Apex domain risk score. So the last example is an interesting one. It's one that we've had from a few customers where there are kind of malicious marketplaces. Now, these marketplaces will not come up as a lookalike because their domain name is far and away anything related to what your domain names are. However, they do have embedded deep inside of them malicious content. So that, I'll give you an example from one of the customers we're working with. They had a marketplace they were monitoring manually, and this marketplace would sell branded content. It could be things like branded bank statements and letterheads and so on. And this marketplace had thousands and thousands of different pages covering different brands. What they wanted to do is they wanted to be able to add to the marketplace to allow brand trust to monitor it, and then only return and crawl the pages that returned brand content. And then obviously they can start taking action on those things. So one of the other things you're going to be able to do with domain crawling is add a manual lookalike. It doesn't have to be related. And you'll have the ability to actually perform a manual crawl on that domain, but specifying keywords. And the keywords may be some kind of branded content or anything along the lines of what you're actually seeing on that marketplace. We'll return only those URLs. Obviously, we don't want to return everything to you. And then you'll have the option to be able to then take action on those things. And again, we perform all of the image technologies on any URLs that we're returning. So that's the third use case for domain crawling. It's probably worth mentioning that this is also kind of the precursor that we want to have in place before we move on to another big project, social media monitoring, which I'll get into a little bit more detail later on and explain why. Okay, so I think most people are familiar with the current AI models that we have in the product at the moment. Just as a reminder, we've got logo detection, we've got keyword detection, we've got category detection. So we will look at the content of a website and we'll say, is this parked, abandoned, in construction, etc. There's quite a few categories there. And we've also got what's called relevance detection. And this is part of identity. So if we find a domain that we think that you actually own, that you've forgotten about, so this shadow IT use case, we will actually try and use GPT to do some research and actually validate whether that's actually the case or not. So that's why we call it relevance detection. So the new models we've got coming up, the first one, and this is almost in order of release, and this next one is coming relatively soon. It's industry classification. So what we'll do here is similar to kind of the parking detection, where we will analyze the content of the screenshot that we grab from a lookalike domain, and we will categorize that. So let's say, for example, we look at the content of the screenshot and we say, we think this is finance insurance, or we think this is automobile, and we will allow those categories to be filtered on the activity table. So if you have a column on the table with all of the different classifications, you're just going to be able to click and filter and show all lookalikes that match maybe the same industry as that your company is operating in. And we know that obviously from a takedown perspective, if you can prove that the lookalike is matching your industry, then the chances of takedown are much higher. And of course, if you're getting thousands of lookalikes, you want to be able to see these lookalikes very quickly, hence the filter. So that should be coming. We're hoping that's going to be sometime in the next quarter. So next, facial recognition. I actually have a demo of this just after this slide. when I say demo, it's just a brief, kind of a brief glimpse into what it might look like in the product. So with facial recognition, this will work very, very similar to how logos work. So at the moment, you'll upload your logos. We will train our models on those logos, and then we will use that to detect your logos on lookalike domains. Same concept. So you may upload faces of company employees or executives. We will train our models on those, and then just as we do with logos, we will detect those executives on any lookalike domain that come through. And of course, if you combine this with URL crawling, the coverage is quite vast. I talked about identities earlier on. So we have an improvement coming at the moment that to our AI recommendations using some slightly altered logic in our prompting with GPT. In our testing so far, it pretty much eliminates all false positives that you may get, and it's extremely accurate. So that should be coming out fairly soon as well. And we talked about this earlier on in terms of the risk rating model. So there's a couple of aspects to this that we're looking at. The first one, which is probably the more imminent one, is that we want to use this model to be able to kind of classify whether we think a lookalike is malicious or not based upon past behavior. And what we'll eventually do is we'll kind of transition from this kind of manual model at the moment. And the good thing about the manual model is we make it very, very clear what signals we're using to score a lookalike in a certain risk, because we've got all of the risk pools along the top. We'll make sure that when we move to a model, we're not going to lose any transparency in terms of how we score risk. So we will still want to present as much information as possible to say, we've scored this 80 out of 100 because we think this. I think it's important, if you're using an AI model or a machine learning model, you don't lose those breadcrumbs to say, how do we even get to that decision? However, there's a second part to this as well, and this is more of a longer term goal. One of the things that we're interested in doing is looking at the metadata for newly registered domains, and then trying to figure out if we can predict maliciousness before it happens. So there's a bunch of different signals that we're actually looking at here. And generally what happens is it takes about 60 days-ish from the time of a newly registered domain to engaging in malicious activity, let's say within 3 days, and then it being added to like a block list, like one of these threat intelligence block lists. It's usually about a 60-day period. And obviously, there's a lot that can happen in that 60-day period. So we've seen this as kind of a preemptive malicious risk scoring model, where we can actually start looking at the data of lookalikes that have ended up becoming malicious, and then seeing if we can use that data to predict future maliciousness. And there's some very, very promising research we've done so far that suggests that this is very possible indeed. So let me show you the facial recognition. It's a very, very simple demo. So I just wanted to show you what it may look like in the product. So let's imagine we've got our two founders here, Rahul and Randall. Let's imagine we've uploaded these to Brand Trust. They've been trained, like I said, in the same way that logos are trained. And let's say we saw a lookalike come into Brand Trust, and we've now tagged those, we've annotated those faces. So we can see here, I tried to find the oldest picture of Rahul and Randall I could, and this was an article. Obviously, we're doing this by just kind of giving it the URL, but the model is still successfully finding Rahul and Randall in this image, and they're quite different angles, different expressions, a little bit scrunched down in terms of the photography angle as well. In the testing that we've done on this model so far, it's been really, really impressive. So we've even been able to detect faces where like 3/4 of the face is almost covered up with a hand. So we're hoping that this is going to be extremely useful for those cases where a lookalike domain may be using executive impersonation to kind of fool potential customers. But this will also be very useful in combined with the URL, the domain crawling as well. Because if they bury it deeper down the website, we're going to find it. Okay, so I've got just a couple of future projects to talk about. And the future projects are the bigger things. So let's start with social media monitoring. And we're going to be starting this later this year. And I mentioned earlier on that the domain crawling was really important because we need a kind of foundation to be able to support the type of content that we're going to see on social media. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we saw a post on X that was kind of impersonating your brand, and let's say it was a clickable image. Those images will go to a URL, but usually they do not go to the apex domain. Usually they will go to a / something, and the vast majority that we've seen. So by adding the support in Brand Trust to be able to support those fully qualified URLs, and then to be able to bring them in and to be able to kind of look at that content alongside your apex domains, that's the foundation that we're building. But what are we going to be able to do with social media monitoring? So we're starting with a few platforms, the most popular ones, and we'll start to look at things like brand mentions, phishing attempts, executive impersonation. This is where our facial recognition comes in. So again, we use our image technologies to be able to then find out if someone is posting using one of your executives, to bring that into Brand Trust, give it a risk score, and then bring it to your attention. So the discovery starts on this later this year. And as we go through that process, I'll definitely be reaching out to more people, because I'm sure some of you have already got tools for this already. And I'm sure some of you probably have things that you're looking for in a platform that we develop. So I'm definitely interested to hear any viewpoints there. And then we've got rogue app monitoring, which kind of go side by side with the social. So with rogue app monitoring, we're talking about things like the Apple Store or Google Play, but there are lots more app stores. And generally what you find is that the Apple Store and the Google Play Store are probably two of the safer stores from a security perspective. We're seeing less rogue apps on those stores because they're well moderated. They've got good security in place. A lot of the other app stores, and at last count, I was up to about 40 of them. They are much less secure, less moderated. You can get content on there, and they have great communities as well. So people are downloading apps from them in quite large volume. So although we may start our testing on the Google Play and Apple stores, we're certainly going to be focusing on some of the lesser known stores, because that's probably where you're going to see these rogue apps appear. And just to clarification, I'm sure you all know this, but a rogue app may be someone trying to impersonate your application. And if someone downloads the wrong thing, if you could search my brand, it could come up with like 2 results, both the same. One of them's yours, one of them's not. If they download the wrong thing and then try and create an account, they've got credentials straight away, and there's all sorts of terrible things they can do. And then we've got the dark web monitoring. So for dark web monitoring, this is more of an intelligence gathering exercise. So being able to monitor the right dark web forums, the Telegram channels and the marketplaces. And dark web monitoring differs from social and rogue app, and indeed domain protection, because there's an end goal to like domain protection, social and rogue app monitoring. And that's essentially, I want to take that content down. Domain takedowns are probably the hardest to do. Social media and rogue app monitoring, they have very wonderful APIs and a very automated system, especially for the big platforms, to be able to just submit this information very quickly and get it taken down very quickly. But the end goal for dark web monitoring, you have to say, well, what's that going to be? It's more like an intelligence report, because we can't take anything down. So we will try and curate in the best way possible if we notice any mention of brands or any leaks or anything that could affect your brand reputation in any way, and then surface that to you as well. Okay, so I think I'm just over the half an hour mark. I think at this stage, I'm going to throw a question out to you guys, and that's kind of what updates or changes would you like to see? And these updates could be, I mean, you can throw stuff in the chat if you want to, but if you want to raise this with your customer success manager or engineer, or if you just want to email me directly, and if you want my email directly, it's matt.latham@redsift.io. Then just send me any requests you've got. And there is, however, and Susan will thank me for doing this, there's an even better way to do this. So Susan is also our community manager, and we have a Redsift community, and there's a space for every product on there. But seeing as this is a brand trust forum, brand trust webinar, it will be wrong not to plug the brand trust forum. So we have a special forum over there that you're going to be able to come and see things like product releases, poll information. We will post videos and webinars on there, and you're going to be able to kind of communicate with other customers and share insights and issues as well. Susan, is there anything to add to that?
I don't think so. We hope to see everyone in the community. We're posting information in there frequently. For example, yesterday we posted about the new features that Matt talked about when we kicked off. So always there's an opportunity for you to give us a like or ask a question or give a comment. And I think, Matt, you've and I've been talking about, you want to join the community conversations more. You want to get the feedback there and let other people see what each other's talking about and thinking, and then have a collaborative environment for product feedback, and or maybe you might put a poll out there in the future, things like that. So if you haven't joined this community, I can join you in just because you attended our webinar. And in the upper right, this is a lot of detail, but in the upper right, you can control whether or not how often you want to see notifications. Like you can get a daily digest, a weekly digest, or for every post. So there's a few features that you can control how we communicate with you through this forum. So I think that's all.
Yeah, thanks for that, Susan. And it's probably worth mentioning as well, the product has lots of links to the community in it as well. So you might see like a knowledge-based article that links to the community. And if, like Susan said, if you've got the login, then you can just start exploring. And there's lots of interesting stuff to see there, and you can get involved as well.
Yes. More and more, we're talking about our efforts to communicate with our existing customers and provide exclusive content and events and previews like we've done today. We'll be working more with Matt and the Brand Trust team to have at least a couple more webinars this year. I'm highlighting some future roadmap items and even talk more about some of the product features that have been released. So I think that's all, Matt. If you don't have anything else, I'm done.
Yeah, no, that's everything. Thanks, Susan.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you found it helpful. And we look forward to seeing you in the community. And until next time, have a great day. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.